The emergency alarm screamed through the corridors of Station Kepler 9, and Dr. Velron's antennae twitched with each pulse of sound. He'd been chief medical officer for 12 cycles now, and that particular alarm meant one thing: critical injury incoming from the mining operations. His assistant rushed ahead to prep the trauma bay while Velron pulled on his surgical gear with practiced efficiency. The doors hissed open and 3 miners carried in their unconscious co-worker on a makeshift stretcher. The woman's breathing was shallow, her face pale beneath a coating of asteroid dust. Blood seeped through hastily applied bandages on her left side. Velron had treated hundreds of mining accidents, maybe thousands. This should have been routine. Put her on the scanner bed, he instructed, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into standard. Carefully now. What happened? Tunnel collapse, one of the miners said. His name badge read Tom Miller. Whole section came down. Rebecca was pulling out the last worker when the supports gave way. She got crushed under the debris. Velron nodded, already moving through the familiar motions. The medical scanner was the most advanced piece of equipment in his facility, a cylindrical device that could analyze any known species in seconds, identifying their exact biology and providing instant treatment protocols. He activated it with a touch of his primary manipulator, and the blue scanning beams descended over the unconscious woman. Then everything went wrong. The scanner's hum rose to a high-pitched whine. Warning lights flashed red across every display panel. Velron stepped back as sparks erupted from the control console, and with a sound like tearing metal, the entire scanner unit exploded in a shower of circuits and melted components. The blast knocked him backward, and his assistant screamed. When the smoke cleared, the scanner was destroyed. Completely unsalvageable. And on the intact display screens along the wall, the same message repeated in a dozen languages: species not in database. Species not in database. Species not in database. Velron stared at those words, his 3 hearts hammering in his chest. In 300 years of galactic medicine, this error hadn't appeared once. The database contained every known intelligent species, every biological variant, every subspecies classification. It was comprehensive. It was complete. It was supposed to be impossible to trigger this message. What does that mean? Tom demanded, pushing forward. The other miners crowded behind him, their faces tight with fear. What's wrong with Rebecca? I don't know, Velron said honestly. His mind was racing. Without species data, he couldn't access any treatment protocols. The scanner should have identified her as human, pulled up her biological parameters, and displayed exactly which medications and procedures would work. Instead, he had nothing. No baseline. No reference. No safe options. He looked down at the injured woman, at Rebecca. Her chest rose and fell in irregular patterns. Blood pressure dropping. Internal injuries likely. Without intervention, she'd be dead within the hour. Can't you just treat her? Another miner asked. You're a doctor, right? It's not that simple, Velron said, though he hated how the word sounded. Different species react differently to medications. What heals one species can poison another. What's a safe procedure for you might be lethal for someone else. The scanner tells us how to treat patients safely. Without it, she dies, Tom finished. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. That's what you're saying. Velron's antennae drooped. He'd taken an oath when he entered medicine. First, do no harm. But how could he help when any action might cause more damage than the original injury? He could give her a painkiller that stopped her hearts. Seal a wound with a compound that dissolved her tissues. Set a bone with a technique that shattered her skeletal structure. The station administrator's voice crackled over his communicator. Dr. Velron, I'm seeing a critical equipment failure in your bay. What's your status? The scanner is destroyed, Velron reported. The patient is unidentified. Species database error. There was a long pause. Then you need to make a decision, Doctor. Either you treat her with available information and accept the liability, or you declare her deceased and we process the incident report. You have 5 minutes to decide. The communication cut off, and Velron looked at the miners surrounding Rebecca's bed. They were human, he knew that much from basic observation. Humans had joined the galactic community only 20 years ago, taking jobs in the most dangerous sectors. Mining. Salvage operations. Radiation cleanup. They worked hard, caused little trouble, and died more often than most species. But they kept coming, kept working, kept pushing into places others wouldn't go. Tom met his eyes. Please, he said simply. Velron looked down at his medical instruments. Centuries of protocols and procedures, all useless without the database. But he had eyes. He had basic chemistry equipment. He had training in fundamental biology that existed before the scanners, before the automated systems that made medicine so easy everyone forgot how to actually observe their patients. Rebecca's breathing hitched, and Velron made his choice. "Everyone out except Tom," he said firmly. "I need space to work, and I need someone who knows her. Can you tell me about human biology? Anything you know?" Tom's expression shifted from desperation to hope. "I'll tell you everything." Velron pulled on a fresh pair of gloves and began his examination with nothing but his own knowledge, his instruments, and a determination that this patient would not die on his watch. The station administrator could deal with the paperwork later. Right now, he had medicine to practice the old way, carefully, methodically, and with everything riding on his own judgment. The real work was just beginning. Dr. Velron worked through the night with nothing but basic tools and his own observations. Tom sat in the corner, answering questions about human biology with whatever knowledge he had from growing up on Earth. Most of it was basic stuff. Humans need oxygen, they drink water, their normal body temperature runs hot compared to most species. But it was more than Velron had from his useless database. The first challenge was stopping the internal bleeding. Velron drew a small blood sample from Rebecca's arm and ran it through his chemical analyzer. The results made his antennae quiver with confusion. Human blood carried oxygen using iron compounds, which wasn't unusual. But the pH balance was all wrong according to standard carbon-based life models. It was more acidic than it should be, yet her cells were functioning normally. He tested a common coagulation agent, the kind used on 70% of known species. Just a single drop on the blood sample. The reaction was immediate and violent. The blood cells ruptured and dissolved. Tom leaned forward, alarmed, but Velron held up a hand. "That's why we test first," he said quietly. One by one, Velron worked through his inventory of medical compounds. Most produced disastrous reactions with human blood. A few did nothing at all. But then he found something interesting, a crystalline powder used for sealing wounds in aquatic species. When mixed with Rebecca's blood, it formed a stable gel. Not a perfect match, but workable. "This might work," Velron muttered, preparing a careful injection. "Tom, hold her steady." The injection went into Rebecca's abdomen, near where Velron's scan suggested the worst bleeding was located. For 10 agonizing minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then her vital signs stabilized. The internal pressure readings dropped. The bleeding was slowing. Tom exhaled hard. "Is she going to make it?" "I don't know yet," Velron admitted. "But she's not getting worse. That's something." Around midnight station time, the medical bay doors slammed open. Administrator Queln stormed in, his scales flushed dark with anger. Behind him stood 2 security officers. "Dr. Velron, I'm ordering you to cease this unauthorized treatment immediately. You're violating every medical protocol we have. The legal liability alone." "Get out," Tom said, standing up. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "Excuse me?" Queln's eye stalk swiveled toward the human miner. "I said get out." Tom moved to block the administrator's path. "Doc's trying to save Rebecca's life. You want to stop him? You'll have to go through me first." The medical bay doors opened again, and 5 more human miners filed in. They didn't say anything, didn't make threats. They just stood there in a line between the administrator and Dr. Velron's workspace. Their expressions were calm but absolutely unmovable. Queln looked at the security officers, who suddenly seemed very interested in examining their boots. Nobody wanted to start a physical confrontation with humans. There were stories, probably exaggerated, about human strength and endurance. About their capacity for violence when protecting their own. "This is highly irregular," Queln sputtered. "So's letting someone die because your scanner broke," one of the miners replied. The administrator left, muttering about incident reports and regulatory violations. The security officers followed quickly. Tom nodded to his fellow miners. "Thanks. You guys can head back. I'll stay with her." As they filed out, Velron continued his work. The next crisis came 2 hours later when Rebecca's fever spiked dangerously high. Velron's people ran cooler than humans, so he'd underestimated how much heat her body could tolerate. But when her temperature hit 40 degrees Celsius, she started seizing. Tom grabbed her shoulders while Velron scrambled for cooling compounds. The first one he tried, a standard fever reducer, made things worse. Her temperature jumped another degree. Velron's hands shook as he searched through his supplies. Everything he knew about medicine said high fever meant infection, meant inflammatory response, meant the body was fighting something. But what if human bodies work differently? He tried the opposite approach. Instead of fighting the fever, he tested a compound that would support it, an immune booster used for reptilian species. The logic made no sense according to his training, but he was out of options. The reaction was remarkable. Rebecca's temperature stabilized at 39 degrees and held there. Her seizures stopped. Her breathing evened out. Tom looked at Velrun with open amazement. How did you know that would work? I didn't, Velrun admitted. I'm making guesses based on observation. Her body seems to want to run hot right now, so I'm letting it. In my species, fever is dangerous. For humans, maybe it's different. Maybe it's how you fight injuries. He spent the rest of the night taking notes. Detailed, careful observations about every test, every reaction, every treatment attempt. Success and failure both. If Rebecca survived, this information could help other humans across the galaxy. If she didn't, well, at least the next doctor would know what not to try. Dawn came slowly to the station, marked only by the shift change alarm. Tom had fallen asleep in his chair, exhausted. Rebecca's vital signs had been stable for 3 hours now. Not improving dramatically, but not declining either. She was holding on. Velrun's communicator buzzed. Another doctor from halfway across the galaxy, someone he'd contacted during the night. The message made his antennae stand straight up. Velrun, we had the same scanner error last month with a human patient named Jack Morrison. Thought it was equipment malfunction. We treated him with standard protocols and nearly killed him. He survived, but barely. Are you saying this is a species-wide issue? Velrun typed back quickly, I believe humans aren't in the database at all. Their biology is fundamentally different from anything we've catalogued. I need all your data on human treatments. Every case, every outcome. The responses started flooding in. Doctors from mining stations, deep space outposts, frontier colonies. All reporting similar experiences with human patients. Equipment failures. Database errors. Treatments that should work but didn't. Injuries that should be fatal but weren't. A pattern was emerging, and it was bigger than just Rebecca Hayes fighting for her life on his medical table. This was something the entire galactic medical community had missed. Humans were supposed to be just another species joining the galactic community. But they weren't. They were something else entirely. Something unprecedented. By morning, Dr. Velrun had received 43 messages from medical facilities across the galaxy. Each one told a similar story. Equipment failures. Database errors. Human patients who defied every standard treatment protocol. What had seemed like isolated incidents were actually pieces of a much larger puzzle. Rebecca remained stable on the medical table, her breathing steady now. Tom had woken up an hour ago and was pacing the room, nursing a cup of something humans called coffee. The smell was bitter and sharp, and Velrun found it oddly unpleasant, but Tom seemed to need it like oxygen. Doc, you should see this, his assistant called out, pulling up data on the main display screen. I've been compiling all the responses you got. Look at the pattern. Velrun studied the information carefully. A human named Kevin Wright had fallen 3 stories on a construction station and survived with only broken bones. The attending physician had tried to set the fractures using standard techniques, but human bones were denser than expected and healed differently. Another case involved a woman named Nicole Foster who'd been exposed to radiation levels that should have killed her within hours. She'd gotten sick, very sick, but recovered after 2 weeks. Her body had somehow repaired the cellular damage. Then there was the case that made Velrun's 3 hearts skip a beat. A human child, maybe 7 years old, named Danny Hughes. He'd contracted a bacterial infection common on space stations. The doctor had administered standard antibiotics, and the child had nearly died from an allergic reaction. But here's what was remarkable, after they'd stopped the medication and simply kept him hydrated, the child's own immune system had fought off the infection in 3 days. 3 days. The same infection took most species 2 weeks to clear even with medication. Their bodies learn, Velrun whispered, reading through the medical notes. Look at this. Danny's immune system identified the bacteria, created antibodies, and eliminated the threat. His doctor took samples before and after. The child's blood literally changed composition to fight the infection. Tom walked over, looking at the screen. Yeah, that's normal for us. We get sick, we get better, and then we usually don't get that same sickness again. Our bodies remember. That's not normal, Velrun said, his voice filled with awe. Most species have immune systems, yes. But they are static. Fixed. They fight threats using pre-programmed responses. Your immune systems adapt and evolve in real time. That's extraordinary. More data kept flowing in. Dr. Thesick from the Outer Rim mining colonies sent detailed scans of a human named James Cooper who'd survived decompression exposure for nearly 30 seconds. 30 seconds in hard vacuum should cause irreversible damage. James had been in a coma for a week, but he'd woken up with nothing worse than some burst blood vessels in his eyes. His brain had somehow protected itself by shutting down non-essential functions. A medical station near the frontier belt reported on a human engineer named Lisa Chen who'd been poisoned by a chemical leak. The toxin was fatal to every known species at the concentration she'd been exposed to. But Lisa had vomited violently for 6 hours, and her liver had somehow processed and eliminated the poison. She'd lost 15 pounds and spent a week recovering, but she'd survived. "I'm starting to see something here," Velron said, pulling up a comparison chart. Every species in the database evolved on stable worlds. Planets with consistent climates, regular seasons, predictable environments. The medical database assumes certain biological constants because those constants exist for everyone else. But humans? "Earth's not stable," Tom interrupted. "Never has been. My grandparents used to tell stories about the old days. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years, then warming periods that melted everything. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. Meteor impacts. Earthquakes. Floods. Earth tried to kill humanity about a dozen different ways throughout our history." Velron's antennae quivered as understanding dawned. "So you evolved to adapt. Not to one environment, but to changing environments. Your biology isn't specialized, it's versatile. That's why you're not in the database. The database was built on assumptions that don't apply to you." He pulled up the Galactic Medical Database architecture and started tracing through its foundational logic. Every protocol was built on certain biological rules. Temperature regulation within narrow ranges. Toxin response following predictable patterns. Healing rates based on metabolic constants. The entire system assumed that species had biological limits that were fixed and knowable. Humans broke those assumptions. Their body temperature could fluctuate several degrees and they'd function normally. They could adapt to different atmospheric pressures, different gravity levels, different radiation exposures. Not easily, and not without cost, but they could do it. They were biologically flexible in ways the database had never accounted for. "That's why the scanner exploded," Velron said suddenly. "It wasn't a malfunction. The system tried to categorize Rebecca based on its existing parameters, and when nothing fit, it caused a logic failure. The scanner couldn't process something that violated its fundamental assumptions about how biology works." Tom set down his coffee cup. "So what does this mean for Rebecca?" "It means I've been approaching this wrong," Velron admitted. "I've been trying to treat her like other species, looking for exact protocols and precise dosages. But human medicine can't work that way. Your bodies are too variable, too adaptive. Treatment has to be flexible, observational, adjusted in real time based on individual response." He turned back to Rebecca, checking her vital signs with fresh understanding. Her fever had dropped to 38 degrees overnight. Her blood pressure was stronger. The internal bleeding had stopped completely. She was healing, but not following any timeline or pattern he recognized. Her body was doing the work in its own way, on its own schedule. A message popped up on his screen from a xenobiologist named Dr. Mirren who worked at the Central Research Institute. "Velron, I've been following your communications with interest. I have a theory about human evolution that might explain what you're seeing. Can we talk?" Velron glanced at Tom, then at Rebecca's stabilizing vital signs. "Yes," he typed back. "I think we need to understand exactly what humans are. Because they're not just another species joining the galactic community. They're something we've never encountered before." Tom walked over to Rebecca's bedside and gently took her hand. "We're just people, document. We're not special." But Velron was beginning to think that humans had no idea just how special they actually were. And the galaxy was about to learn the same lesson. Dr. Mirren arrived on station Kepler 9 30 hours later, carrying 3 data tablets and an expression of barely contained excitement. She was a Quellan, tall and insectoid with multifaceted eyes that saw in spectrums Velron couldn't imagine. She'd spent 20 years studying xenobiology, specifically how different species evolved across the galaxy. "Show me the patient," she said without preamble. Velron led her to the medical bay where Rebecca still rested. Her color had improved significantly. The monitors showed steady vital signs, though they were unlike anything in the medical database. Tom had finally gone back to his quarters to sleep, but two other human miners had taken his place, sitting quietly in the corner like protective guardians. Mirren circled the bed slowly, her antennae twitching as she examined Rebecca. She pulled out a handheld scanner and took several readings, muttering to herself in her native language. Finally, she turned to Velrun with those unsettling compound eyes. "Do you know what a death world is, Doctor?" Velrun's translator stumbled over the term. "Death world? I'm not familiar with that classification." "It's not an official term," Mirren explained, setting down her equipment. "It's what xenobiologists call planets that are actively hostile to life. Worlds with extreme temperature variations, unstable tectonics, high radiation, aggressive predators, frequent extinction-level events. Most life-bearing planets are gentle, stable. They nurture the species that evolve there. But some planets, very few, are in constant flux. They challenge life at every turn." She pulled up a holographic display of Earth. The planet rotated slowly, showing blue oceans and green continents. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic. "Earth is a death world," Mirren said flatly. "One of the most volatile life-bearing planets we've ever discovered." One of the miners spoke up from the corner. His name badge read Greg Patterson. "What do you mean volatile?" "Earth's beautiful." "Beautiful and deadly," Mirren replied. She zoomed in on the planet's surface. "Your world has 5 major extinction events in its geological record. Times when most life on the planet was wiped out. Meteor impacts. Supervolcanoes. Ice ages. Your continents drift and collide, creating mountain ranges and earthquakes. Your climate swings between frozen wastelands and tropical heat over cycles of tens of thousands of years." She pulled up comparative data. Most species in the galaxy evolved on what we call garden worlds. Planets with stable climates, predictable seasons, manageable challenges. My homeworld, for example, has had the same average temperature for 3 million years. No ice ages. No mass extinctions. Evolution there was slow and steady. "But Earth wasn't like that," Velrun said, beginning to understand. "Not even close," Mirren confirmed. "Life on Earth had to evolve one critical trait just to survive: adaptability. Not specialization. Not optimization for a specific niche. Pure, raw adaptability. The ability to handle change, to survive chaos, to keep functioning when everything around you is falling apart." She walked over to Rebecca's bedside. "Humans are the apex product of that evolutionary pressure. Your species spent millions of years learning to survive in environments that changed faster than evolution normally works. You can't fly like the avians. You can't breathe underwater like the Kelna. You're not as strong as the Thraxians or as long-lived as my people. But you can survive almost anywhere." Greg stood up, defensive. "We're not indestructible. We die all the time." "Of course you do," Mirren said gently. "You're mortal. But you die less often than you should. That's the remarkable thing. Your biology has backup systems for your backup systems. When your environment gets too hot, you sweat to cool down. Too cold, you shiver to generate heat. Low oxygen, your blood produces more red cells. High pressure, your body adjusts. You have this incredible capacity to maintain function across a range of conditions that would kill most species." Velrun thought about all the data he'd collected. Their immune systems that adapt in real time. Their ability to heal from injuries that should be fatal. Their psychological resilience. "Exactly," Mirren interrupted. "Physical adaptability is only part of it. Humans also evolved psychological mechanisms for dealing with trauma and stress. You use humor to cope with danger. You form strong social bonds that help groups survive hardship. You can make decisions under pressure that would paralyze other species." She pulled up medical scans from dozens of human patients across the galaxy. "Look at where humans work in the galactic economy. Deep space mining in radiation zones. Toxic waste processing. Emergency repairs in hard vacuum. Construction on high-gravity worlds. These are jobs that most species won't do because they're too dangerous. But humans volunteer for them. You actively seek out the challenges that others avoid." "Because the pay is good," Greg said with a slight smile. "Hazard pay is real nice." "The pay is good because the jobs are nearly impossible," Mirren countered. "But humans don't just do them for money. You actually seem to prefer working in challenging environments. It's like you're bored when things are easy." At that moment, Rebecca's eyes fluttered open. Everyone in the room froze. She blinked several times, focusing slowly on the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Then she turned her head and saw Velrun standing beside her bed. "Hey Doc," she said, her voice rough and dry. "Did I miss something important?" Velrun felt relief flood through his system. "Rebecca, you were in an accident. You've been unconscious for nearly 2 days. How do you feel?" "Like I got crushed by a tunnel collapse," she said, then managed a weak laugh. "Oh wait, I did get crushed by a tunnel collapse. That's actually pretty funny when you think about it." Mirren leaned forward, fascinated. "You're making jokes? You nearly died. You should be terrified or traumatized." Rebecca looked at the Quellan scientist with confusion. "What else am I supposed to do? Cry about it? I'm alive. That's what matters. Besides, if I don't laugh about the stupid ways I almost die, I'd probably go crazy." She paused. "Who are you, anyway?" "Dr. Mirren. I'm a xenobiologist studying your species." "Studying humans? Why?" Rebecca tried to sit up, winced, and Velrun gently pushed her back down. "Because you're fascinating," Mirren said simply. "Your species evolved on a death world, which makes you fundamentally different from every other intelligent species in the galaxy. You're not in our medical database because you don't fit our models of how biology should work. You're adaptable in ways we didn't think were possible." Rebecca processed this information, then looked at Velrun. "So that's why your scanner exploded?" "Yes," Velrun admitted. "Your biology violated the system's assumptions." Rebecca laughed again, stronger this time. "We broke your computer by existing. That's the most human thing I've ever heard." She looked at Greg in the corner. "Wait until Tom hears about this. He's going to love it." Velrun watched her laugh about nearly dying, watched her make light of being an evolutionary impossibility, and he finally understood what Mirren had been trying to explain. Humans weren't just physically resilient. They were psychologically built to handle chaos, to find humor in darkness, to keep going when everything said they should give up. They were survivors in the truest sense of the word. And the galaxy had never seen anything quite like them. 3 months after Rebecca Hayes walked out of Dr. Velrun's medical bay on her own 2 feet, the first comprehensive human medical database went live across the galactic network. Velrun had spent every spare moment compiling data from hundreds of cases, collaborating with doctors from 70 different stations and colonies. The database was massive, detailed, and came with a warning label that made him slightly proud: "Human biology is highly variable. Treat each patient as an individual. Observe and adjust." The Galactic Medical Council had given him an award. A crystalline plaque that now sat in his office gathering dust. They'd made speeches about innovation and dedication. But none of that mattered as much as what happened on a random Tuesday afternoon when Rebecca showed up at his medical bay carrying a container of something warm. "Brought you lunch, Doc," she said, setting it on his desk. "It's called chicken soup. Human comfort food." Velrun looked at the steaming liquid with cautious interest. After 3 months of regular visits from the human miners, he'd learned that human food was an adventure. Sometimes pleasant, sometimes baffling, always intense. "What's in it?" "Chicken, vegetables, noodles, salt. Nothing that'll kill you." "Probably." Rebecca grinned. "Tom's been teaching me to cook station style. Turns out I'm not terrible at it." She'd made a full recovery, though it had taken 6 weeks instead of the 3 Velrun had initially estimated. Her body had healed on its own schedule, ignoring his careful projections. The broken ribs had mended faster than expected. The internal injuries had taken longer. Her body had prioritized what mattered most, in an order that made biological sense but defied medical prediction. "How's the shoulder?" Velrun asked, referring to an injury that had revealed itself 2 weeks into her recovery. "Good as new. Maybe better." Rebecca rotated her arm in a full circle. "Weird thing though, it doesn't hurt in cold weather anymore. Used to ache every time the station cycled the environmental controls. Now nothing." "Your body probably rebuilt the joint slightly differently," Velrun said, making a note on his tablet. "Corrected some underlying issue while it was healing the primary damage. We're seeing that pattern with other human patients. Your healing process doesn't just repair, it sometimes improves." Tom walked in behind Rebecca, carrying his own container of food. Over the past months, these lunch visits had become routine. The human miners would stop by, bring food, and talk. About Earth, about their families, about the strange difference between human culture and galactic norms. Velrun had learned more about humanity from these casual conversations than from any medical text. "Got your message about the database going live," Tom said, settling into a chair. Saw it's being downloaded to medical facilities across 6 sectors already. 12 sectors as of this morning, Velron corrected. And I'm getting messages from doctors who are relieved to finally have guidelines. A physician on Station Outreach 7 successfully treated a human with severe burns using the protocols I developed from Rebecca's case. The patient is expected to make a full recovery. Rebecca smiled. So me nearly dying helped save somebody else. That's pretty cool actually. More than somebody else, Velron said, pulling up statistics. In the 3 months since I started compiling this data, human mortality rates in medical facilities have dropped by 43%. Humans are still taking the most dangerous jobs in the galaxy, still getting injured at higher rates than other species, but now when they reach medical care, they survive. Greg walked past the open door, saw the gathering, and stuck his head in. Meeting in the doc's office again? Anybody save me some soup? Made extra, Rebecca said, pulling out another container from her bag. Figured you'd show up. More human miners drifted by over the next few minutes. Some came in, others just waved from the hallway. Velron's medical bay had become an unofficial gathering spot for the humans on Station Kepler 9. They felt comfortable here, safe. And Velron had grown to enjoy their company in ways that surprised him. You know what's interesting? Tom said between bites of soup. Back on Earth, we've got this saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Most people think it's just motivational stuff, something to say when life gets hard. But for us, it's literally true. Our bodies actually do get stronger from surviving bad situations. Velron nodded. I've documented that. Humans exposed to low levels of toxins develop resistance. Bones broken and healed become denser at the breakpoint. Diseases survived leave immunity. Your species learns from damage in ways others don't. It's because Earth spent millions of years trying to kill us, Rebecca said matter-of-factly. We learned to take a beating and come back meaner. The exploded scanner still sat in the corner of Velron's office. He'd kept it as a reminder, though everyone told him he should throw it away. The twisted metal and melted circuits represented something important to him, the moment when all his certainty had shattered, forcing him to actually think instead of just following protocols. Can I ask you something? Velron said to the group. Why do humans keep taking these dangerous jobs? You could work in safer sectors. You could stay in the inner colonies where the risks are lower. But you don't. You push out to the frontier, to the mining operations, to places where injury and death are common. Why? The humans exchanged glances. Finally, Tom spoke up. Because that's what we do. That's what we've always done. Humans have been pushing into dangerous territory since we climbed down from the trees. It's not that we're trying to die, we just hate being bored more than we fear getting hurt. Does that make sense? Not logically, Velron admitted. But I'm beginning to understand it's not about logic. It's about something deeper in your species. You're driven to explore, to challenge yourselves, to go places others won't go. Plus the money really is good, Greg added with a laugh, and everyone joined in. A message popped up on Velron's screen. Another doctor, this time from a colony near the Gamma Rim, thanking him for the database. They'd just successfully treated a human named Bobby Chen for decompression sickness using the new protocols. Full recovery expected within a week. Velron looked around his office at the humans who'd become his friends. Rebecca, who'd survived impossible injuries. Tom, who'd stood between him and the station administrator, protecting his right to practice medicine his own way. Greg and the others who'd formed a human wall to keep him working when regulations said he should give up. I learned something from treating you, Velron said to Rebecca. Something that's not in any database. The most important medical tool isn't technology or protocols. It's the willingness to actually see your patient as an individual, to observe, to adapt, to try things that might not work because doing nothing definitely won't work. Rebecca raised her soup container in a mock toast. To doctors who blow up their scanners and save lives anyway. The others raised their containers too, laughing. Velron didn't have soup, but he raised his water container and joined the gesture. It was a human custom, this toasting thing. Like so many human customs, it seemed illogical but felt right. Outside his office window, Velron could see the mining ships preparing for another run to the asteroid belt. Dangerous work. Hard work. The kind of work that would keep bringing injured humans to medical bays across the galaxy. But now, thanks to one tunnel collapse and one exploded scanner, those humans had a much better chance of survival. And Velron had learned that sometimes the best answers come from the questions you never expected to ask. Sometimes you have to let the system fail before you can see what actually matters. The soup was pretty good, actually. Warm and salty and completely unlike anything in his species' cuisine. But that was humanity for you, unexpected, different, and somehow exactly what you needed.